We'll be starting in 8 minutes, and this will be the session in English. So for Minaji Apollinaire, la séance francophone a déjà été enregistrée. The session in French has already been recorded. So merci Minaji, thank you Minaji, and other francophones. Okay, there are more francophones. It's funny, there were of course anglophones showing up in the francophone session, and you're both welcome if you understand the language. Let's say we'll keep the hellos until a couple of minutes, 1 minute before the session, so we can share a bunch. Good, Odile, if you are ready to follow in English. Right now, we've got a little bit over 7 minutes left to go. And you're all welcome to follow us on the platform of your choice. This Global Assembly, this special event, is going to be broadcast on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Welcome. We'll be starting in 5 minutes, and already we have many people on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube who are sharing their greetings. So let's go through them. So Odile Nwongu, who's watching on LinkedIn, welcome Odile, who says, "I'm ready and good evening." We're ready as well and looking forward to this. Anish Shah says, "Hello, good morning, afternoon, evening to all." Indeed, in the Peer Hub, we have participants from over 86 countries and all time zones. So some of you we know, and we're especially appreciative of those of you who are making the effort to join and attend, even though it's quite late for you. All right, for Marwo, Dagan Hussein Ali, who says, "This is a good lesson." Okay, well, we hope there will be indeed lessons to be learned from this sharing of experience and from today's presenters. All right, Fousseni Kone is a francophone. So what he says in French is that he missed the French session. So thank you, Fousseni. Merci de nous rejoindre quand même. Dr. Tanushree Mandal says, good morning, afternoon, evening. This is Dr. Tanushree Mandal joining from West Bengal. And Manoj Bhagat from India, welcome to you as well. A survey scholar who is joining us. Abdulatif Chimo from Abuja, Nigeria. Please keep sending your greetings. We're reading every comment, and you'll be welcome to send not just comments and hellos, but also tough questions, your testimony about vaccine hesitancy and acceptance and beyond to demand promotion, community engagement, and so on. Ijoma Onuoha says, good evening. Happy to be here. Thank you, Ijoma. We welcome you as well. Mohammed Ahmed Adan joining from Mandera, Kenya, and actually in the room with me are a large number of, even though we haven't even started yet, almost 100 scholars have joined ahead of the start of the session. All right. And Sohini Sanyal from India says hello to global peers on LinkedIn. Thank you, Sohini. I saw you shared the post and the announcement for this event. Thank you for doing that, and I encourage you, if you have people who would be interested in this, it's not for its own sake, it's only if it makes sense to you, to actually share this. You can share the post wherever you are, with a group or with individuals, up to you, on the platform of your choice, as we're now on all platforms, I would say. All right. And I see Abdallah Malin is also joining us from Facebook. We seem to have most of our viewers from Facebook. It's brand new that we're able to actually live stream on LinkedIn. So if you are on LinkedIn, especially appreciative if you can help colleagues, including fellow members of the Peer Hub, know that we're actually on live streaming on LinkedIn as well. It's more professional. Facebook is more for family and personal life. LinkedIn is really ostensibly the network for professional networks. And of course, in the room, I want to greet some of these scholars who are members of the Peer Hub and so who are here as well. So someone says hi from Kenya, but his name is Samsung SM G928. So I believe, yeah. All right, so he is back in the Zoom room. Patrick Zimula, Samarandra Biswas, Anita Bargava, Mel Altahir, Nabil Liakat, Fateh Azmatullah, Magaji Garba, Loretta Ahuko. Those are just the last few names that I can see here in the chat where we are holding the event and then live streaming to all of the major platforms. I suggest we start a little bit of music to kick up the pace. We'll see you in less than 1 minute. Welcome to you from the Geneva Learning Foundation here in Geneva, Switzerland for this special event of the COVID-19 Peer Hub. We're talking today about vaccine hesitancy, vaccine acceptance, actually part of a whole spectrum of issues that we'll be discussing together once again for members of the COVID-19 Peer Hub. And we have been meeting since July 2020 and will be kicking off today members of the Peer Hub, are actually starting to develop a peer-reviewed case study on this topic, drawing on their personal experience. Before I go any further, I see many of you joining across the platforms where we're live streaming for the first time. So Sambo Ishaku, glad to join. Fuseni Kone, sorry you couldn't join the Francophone link, but glad that you're with us on Facebook. Let's see, Sambo is with us from YouTube. Dr. Tanushri Mandal is also across all the platforms. Dr. Snehid Singh from LinkedIn. Dan Skudeva Nikovska, joining from Skopje, North Macedonia via Facebook. Tanushri Mandal from YouTube. Tola Toki from Facebook. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all. And Abdallah Malin from Mogadishu, Somalia. All right, I'd like, first of all, to tell you a little bit more about what we are doing with this event. And we are, for the first time, streaming across all of the major platforms. Of course, for members of the Peer Hub, you're welcome to join here, as you usually do, inside the Zoom room. But we know now that many of you have preferred to go, for example, to LinkedIn. Or on YouTube, it is the same program, the same Peer Hub General Assembly that is being live streamed, but a special one today with a number of speakers, one of whom is already in the room, and hopefully the others will join in the next couple of minutes. You can also find us on Twitter, Digital Scholar X. Just search for Geneva Learning Foundation on the platform of your choice. You should be able to surface our page. Right now, many of you are on Facebook, where we've been focusing our efforts since about March of this year, and now have almost 5,000 people who are actively using the page. Now, before I get any further, just a kind of sneak preview and a pre-announcement of the Teach to Reach conference in 2021. By then, we hope to have significantly grown the audience and reach of our network that is already close to 30,000 members, participants, several thousand of them in the Peer Hub specifically. Now, pleased to introduce, and one of the things that's going to make this session very special is that we have three special guests today. Heidi Larson from the Vaccine Confidence Project, Lisa Menning from the World Health Organization, and Susan Mckay from GAVI. I see Lisa Menning is already with us in the room, and we're looking for, I don't know if, and I know that Charlotte is already reaching out to our other two speakers to make sure that to resolve whatever connection problems they may be having. And that is, we're going to actually start with their presentations. As you know, we are all kicking off the process of developing a peer-reviewed case study exploring specific piece of experience. So here's the overall schedule. We're now in week 1. And this is really, if you haven't started yet, today is the day when, after listening to the presentations and to the experiences that will be shared today, we really would like you to start taking notes, outlining, maybe just drafting. Tell your story. No one can tell your story for you about what happened when you were confronted with people who were reluctant, feared, or were otherwise hesitant about vaccines. And as you know, we're really going to ask you to develop, we always straddle between French and English, develop a case study from vaccine hesitancy to acceptance. Lisa Menning is going to share with us some of the complexities around that. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Lisa, first of all, a warm welcome to you from myself, from the rest of the team at the Foundation, and of course from members of the COVID-19 Peer Hub. I don't know if you're able to turn on your webcam. We'd love to see you as well.
Hi, Retta. Hi, everyone. Actually, my webcam's disabled. It says your host has stopped it.
Okay, let's fix that.
So I will share my screen though. And firstly, just to start by saying thank you very much for the invitation to join this discussion and just to make some opening remarks on hesitancy in a world with COVID-19. So is that okay? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can. I'm just trying to make a few adjustments and then we should be good to go. Yes.
Okay. Just let me know if you want me to. Oh, okay. It's working now.
Okay,
great.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So that's fine. So, just to kick this off and to set the scene with a few thoughts on the current global context on COVID and the expectations in relation to a future vaccine, and some of the complexity we're thinking about, and some of the many factors that are going to be shaping people's intentions and expectations of COVID vaccines and their willingness to accept or feel confident about these vaccines. So just on the next slide here, just wanted to lay out some of the contextual factors that we know are going to be shaping these various drivers of COVID vaccine uptake. So we know that right now there's a lot of expectation, and people are really, for the most part, looking forward to what could be a return to normal life, and what that could be how the rollout of vaccines could represent the wide scale up of the use of COVID vaccines and their impact. So there's a lot of hopes being pinned on the future success of these COVID vaccines. And there's so much attention on these vaccines almost every day. There's some new news about more trial results for the vaccines. So we have multiple candidates and a lot of complex science about these vaccines as well, and a lot of unknowns. And the evolutionary path of these vaccines as we progress through these trials is also going to change at different points in time. So we have this accelerated process, and then as we get closer to their rollout, a lot of questions too about who's going to be getting the vaccines and when. And with all of this environment, there's loads of information also swirling. And this has been the situation from the start of the pandemic, that we've been in this situation called an infodemic, which is really where there's an excess of information on the pandemic and the associated social, political, economic consequences, and all the related questions about the virus and what's actually happening. So in this entire context, we have so many new, complex, competing factors that all of these together, plus many others, are eventually going to be shaping the decisions that we make about whether or not to seek or accept a COVID vaccine in future. And so as we get closer to the time that these vaccines start to become available, people more and more are going to start thinking about their own vaccination decisions. And there's going to be various kinds of questions that people will be asking, or they might already be asking themselves, their friends, others. So they might already be thinking, well, what about the risks in providing this vaccine to my child or to myself, or making sure that my older parent might get that vaccine? Are these vaccines going to be necessary for everyone? Who's really going to be first in line, and what's going to happen to them? Are these vaccines going to be safe? And, I think that it's going to be a while before we get to a point where we have answers to, many of these questions. So in many respects, it's kind of understandable that people could be asking a lot of these questions where a lot of the science is not yet absolutely conclusive. And so what this means is that when we look at the spectrum of intentions towards a future COVID vaccine, we have this curve that will be different in every context. It's going to change over time. It's always going to vary depending on the local situation. But generally, there's this spectrum of intentions towards starting with someone who might be an activist or opposed to vaccination. They might be rejecting vaccines, or they could be hesitant. They're questioning. They're not entirely motivated. They have some concerns or questions. They're still in the minority, this group. And then we have the vast majority that's accepting, they're going to go along with the norm, and generally they do seek. And then demand, vaccination demand, that's much more of a proactive intention. And lastly, on the right-hand side, there's those that really advocate for and really strongly might campaign and be a champion to promote vaccination. So this will vary in any setting, but really what we're mainly interested in here in this program are those who are hesitant. And what this means is that they generally have a low motivation. Their intentions, they're not even sure yet, really, they're not fully decided. And like I said, this is going to be context specific, and it will also vary over time. So in very broad, simple terms, how do we respond as a program, as an immunization program, or as a health worker, or even as a community leader somewhere, maybe a religious leader or a youth leader, someone who runs a medical program? If you're faced with someone and you're having a conversation about vaccination and that person says, well, I'm not really sure. I've still got a couple of questions. I'd like to have a discussion about that. How do you respond to that? Well, in short, there are three main steps: to listen, and just to proactively show that you're listening to them. You're hearing their questions and concerns. And you might ask a couple more questions to feel like you can better understand where they're coming from. And then you really get to a point where you can really feel like you get their perspective. And once you have that clear understanding on, why they have these questions, what's underlying it, and what could be the factors that might move them towards vaccination, you can then determine how to engage and interact with them to be able to respond with certain kinds of tailored and targeted strategies, and be able to provide them with better information that might help respond to their concerns. Now, what we do know is that hesitancy is almost always influenced by communications with a trusted health worker. A health worker in so many studies around the world, across many, many countries, when people are, when the parents or others are asked about who they most trust in terms of information about vaccines and immunization, they almost always say their most trusted source is a health worker. And so therefore, your health worker has the greatest chance of being able to help respond to these questions and concerns, and to help bring someone along that curve, move them into being in a position where they're more likely to accept or demand vaccination. And trust here, and having a trusted interlocutor, a partner in this conversation, is really how we're going to move this person along the line. So trust is absolutely key here in being able to convert someone, shall we say, who may have these questions. I'll just leave it there for now, but we'll hand over to our other presenters here today to take us into this in a little more depth. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Lisa Menning from the World Health Organization. So we asked Lisa to provide a short recap. We have with us, and thank you for doing so, we have two additional presenters. So let me just go back to the so we have with us, and glad they were able to overcome any technical hurdles, Heidi Larson from the Vaccine Confidence Project, and Susan Mckay from GAVI. So we're going to ask Susan first, and then Heidi to again make a short presentation. We're really trying to bring to those of you participants in the Peer Hub who are starting to write your case study. It's about something that's happened to you. It is your story, but it needs to be informed by science, by what we know, by the evidence, by what the research says. And that is the point of kicking off in this way. And we're very grateful to our presenters. Susan Mckay, are you able to unmute and share your webcam as well? All right. I've asked Susan Mckay to unmute. Yes. Wonderful.
Yes.
Okay.
Hopefully you can see my camera.
Yes, indeed. Let me just.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll just share my screen. Can you see that? Okay, I'll just put it into.
Yes.
Presenter view. So I'm going to pick up from where Lisa left off, because what I'm going to talk about is Lisa was talking very much at the individual level, and how we look at this in terms of making a programmatic response to this, in terms of having immunization programs prepared to essentially persuade people to take vaccines, and how they have a systematic approach to generating demand. And what we've seen here is that we've got a kind of perfect storm with COVID-19. It arrived at a time, and this is a really important quote, when hesitancy about long-established vaccines had become a real and present danger. We've all read about the stories of people reluctant around measles vaccine, etc. And although the vast majority of people are really on board with vaccination, very high rates generally, the combination of factors that we have this tsunami of misinformation spreading on social media, that we have a sort of polarization and decreased trust in governance around the world, and in science and industry generally, and this weaknesses within health systems that we're seeing. This time, all of these things are coming together to make us really be very, very concerned. And we'll see that what we've seen since the pandemic started is that immunization obviously has just become front and center in discussions, and we're seeing it as a very polarizing issue in a way that we have worried about for many years, but this really, with the need to have a vaccine against COVID-19, this is really at the front of everyone's mind. And as Lisa pointed to, and I know that Heidi will speak to this too, that it's critically important that strong communication, interpersonal communication by trusted frontline health providers is absolutely critical in terms of bringing in a vaccine. But it does go further in that we really need an evidence-driven, scientifically data-driven approach to vaccine uptake and demand. And so in terms of what a program needs to do, here are some of the areas of which having a joined-up approach, it's where national immunization programs really need to have this sort of systematic approach to demand. And you'll see there the first, it's sort of going around the circle of being able to measure the drivers of vaccine uptake and demand, being able to listen systematically to what people are saying, make sense of those signals, and actually drive joined-up approaches so that we can give a coherent voice throughout through the system. With COVID-19 introduction, it's going to be very important, and also maintaining immunization more generally. We're going to have frontline workers who are going to be asked to take these new vaccines as early adopters, but will be absolutely vital for maintaining and also building demand for a new vaccine. It's very important also that we have these very behaviorally informed strategies around behaviors around the pandemic, but also in vaccine uptake, and really investing in good old-fashioned trust building through key players. So we'll see that. We've been working very closely with WHO and very much supporting the group that has been bringing in some new tools for measuring behavioral and social drivers of immunization. So we're very supportive of that. But of course, the pandemic is making us bring these approaches in much faster than at a global scale than we otherwise would. But building this supportive information environment, and I know that Heidi will speak to the kind of systematic approaches in terms of through the social listening that they have been doing for well over a decade to inform, so that we have really good digital engagement strategies, and working with social media companies also to make this very much of a joined up approach. Frontline workers, absolutely critical. There are a number of partners who are working on tools for frontline workers, and also working with trusted networks like the pediatrics associations, nursing associations, and influencers through the professional bodies, as well as civil society organizations. Also, this listening to and understanding target populations. We've all been working in childhood vaccination, but we're very quickly having to implement at scale an all age vaccine. So this is very much understanding new audiences. And I think to my point here, going beyond the kind of organizations that we had been working with on childhood vaccinations, but engaging people who work with older populations, community groups, high-risk populations, with people with chronic illness or diabetes, etc. And I just want to just leave my part with pointing to the importance of really credible information. And for example, the initiative through WHO in terms of accrediting websites with reputable information and joining up and making it a movement for change. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Susan Mckay from GAVI. We heard first Lisa Menning from the World Health Organization. And we're now going to turn to Heidi Larson from the Vaccine Confidence Project, also from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Welcome, Heidi Larson. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to, again, ask if you make sure that you are able to turn on your webcam and the audio. Yes.
Hi. Let me put my earphones on, which will be helpful, and get the image going. Okay.
Thank you for joining us. So if you want to just, share your screen, there should be a green share screen button somewhere in your Zoom window.
Okay, sure, here we go. Okay.
Wonderful.
Do you see COVID Peer Hub?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Do you title slide. Okay, here we go. Thanks very much. I mean, I was counting on, and they've done, between Lisa and Susan, certainly covered a lot of really important points and the landscape of what the issues are. I'm just I thought just to complement that would be, I'm going to talk a bit about our systematic listening, but also give a bit of an example of some of our on-the-ground work with community engagement and listening around Ebola vaccine trials, which we're now repurposing for our COVID listening work with some similar themes that we're seeing emerge. I lead the Vaccine Confidence Project at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. We have a global network of listeners and collaborators, but we also use social media monitoring and pulse surveys to listen to and understand what are driving some of the drops in confidence and acceptance in vaccines, but also to listen for innovation and opportunities for building confidence. We learned very early, the Confidence Project is now 10 years old, that vaccine confidence is not just about the product, but as Lisa said, well, there's a lot of, it's about confidence in the providers who are the trusted ones. And if you can't trust the trusted ones, that's kind of a litmus test for how well you're going to do. But confidence in providers, confidence in the system, policymakers, and politicians. Politicians is a tougher one. Just to kind of give a glimpse of the landscape right now, this was back in July, but we have been running since then in multiple countries and multiple waves within countries, trying to get a read of if a COVID vaccine became publicly available, I would take it. And we did add in the interviews with people, publicly available means approved as being safe and effective. Overall, in the meanwhile, some of these numbers have changed, not dramatically, but they have been up and down. But what we do see is that there's a lot of overall willingness. The dark blue and medium blue are either strongly agree or agree. The ones that I think will be more challenging are the orange, the strongly disagree, but I think that those who don't know, it's perfectly reasonable given the fact that this has been an emerging landscape. But one of the points of showing you this is that this is not about high income or low income difference. DRC and France are the least confident in the world. So, and Europe, it's a mix of Europe, DRC, Pakistan, and Peru in the lower end. So this is highly diverse. These issues are varied and global and not divided by high and low income countries. And within each of these, there's diversity. This is just another take. I work closely with World Economic Forum, and this is, they work with Ipsos as their polling group. And this is just a different mix of countries with a number of consistencies, but they did add a few different countries than we had. But as you can see, again, it's quite varied across the world. And there are many factors in that. It's about trust in government. It's about historic experiences. It's about how governments are managing their COVID response more broadly. If populations have not had a great experience with how their governments have been managing the COVID response, that can have a knock-on effect on their willingness to take a vaccine, because vaccines are highly, highly embedded in government. They're recommended by government, regulated by government, approved by government, sometimes required by government. So if you're having issues with government, it can have a bearing on acceptance of vaccines. But it's not the only factor, thankfully. There's a lot of other issues, and we asked many questions in our about the overall COVID experience, because we think that issues like compliance with masking and social distancing, if people aren't complying with that, it may influence their willingness to comply with a vaccine. So we really try to get as much contextual information as possible. This is just one of the many questions we have, and all of this data we're about to, in the next few weeks, open a dashboard so you can click on a country and see a lot of information about different behavioral aspects around COVID. But one thing we did find, for instance, is that the country of manufacturer would impact people's willingness to take a vaccine in 65% of the country's populations. This is the average overall in 17 countries around the world. That's pretty high. So there's a number of different factors that will influence, well, whether someone will accept or not a vaccine. I'm going to switch to one of the things that we set up to work on from the very beginning, from the founding of the Vaccine Confidence Project, and that is after working with UNICEF and collaboratively with WHO for the 10 years before the Vaccine Confidence Project. One of the emerging issues that I saw, and as a vaccine group we saw, was that there was a growing number of rumors emerging, and one of the challenges to vaccine programs was triaging what do I need to care about, what's not to be worried about, how do I know the difference? So we've come up with a framework. We have a list of prompters, what we call prompters, what triggers these rumors. And we have a checklist of different types of prompters. We have a list of what can be sustaining and amplifying factors. What makes a rumor spread? What is it about one rumor that will spread wildly in India and it doesn't go anywhere in Pakistan, for instance, or in Africa, in two different countries, the same rumor has very different behavior. And that can be because of different sustaining and amplifying factors. Again, it could be political, it could be cultural, it could be some historic experience, but we have a list in our checklist of these different factors. So when you're diagnosing the risk of different rumors, we can help programs diagnose what are the risks of, if they have 5 rumors, which ones do they need to pay attention to. And then we look at what's the potential impact, from just drops in confidence to disruptions in programs to various other factors. And then based on the scoring from these different checklists, we come up with what we call the green alert, the yellow alert, or the red alert. And one is keep monitoring it in the background, but you don't need to change anything. Yellow alert, you want to get more background information. And red alert is a much more proactive reaction because of the imminent risk of any kind of damage. So this framework we've developed initially around programs, but in the past few years, we've done more and more work on confidence building, rumor listening, and management around vaccine trials. And some of that work we did around Ebola vaccines, Zika vaccines, and then we did a big global project on maternal vaccination during pregnancy, and now moving into much more around COVID. We have seen, as Lisa mentioned and Susan, there are different ends of the spectrum. We've got the very proactive supporters to the anti-groups. This happens to be in Leicester Square in London, but what was fascinating to me is that 200 years ago, there were similar demonstrations around the smallpox vaccine up in Leicester in northern England, but we saw similar demonstrations like this also in South Africa around COVID vaccine trials. You could just change the setting and some of the signs were exactly the same. One of the other things that we're looking at is the global transmission of rumors. It used to be, we finally in the global health community went from just top-down communication to recognizing the importance of local engagement, local listening, local preparedness. But in the meanwhile, in this hyper-connected social media environment, we realized you need to be local, global. You need to constantly be looking at the ecosystem, the information ecosystem. This is Stella Emanuel, who was propagating a lot of misinformation with her white coat Dr. Piers in Texas. She's Nigerian by birth, came to the US, but what she was preaching here within 24 hours, and then within the following week, this spike in social media activity in Nigeria was Stella. In the same week, this was just within a week of her talking about her views. It was that quick. So we shouldn't underestimate how quickly and how dynamic this global space is. One of the big case studies that we worked on in the beginning of the Ebola outbreak and trials was in Ghana. 2 Ebola trials were shut down, suspended, very early. These were phase 1 trials, the very first stage of the trial, for some of exactly the same things we were hearing around some of the early COVID vaccine trials. COVID does not exist, or Ebola doesn't exist. This was created, this was made up. It's a way for people to sell more vaccines. And also, one of the challenges with trials, and one of the challenges we have now in the COVID vaccine space, is that we still have trials ongoing while countries are considering emergency authorization. So there's lots of questions. Wait a minute, how can you still have trials ongoing when you're thinking about introducing it to the public? How do you manage having both, which we've had to manage with Ebola, because the Ebola vaccines were being rolled out while trials were still going on and are still going on. But in the meanwhile, under trials, there's a lot of different things you have to think about in terms of what you can talk about and what you can't talk about publicly, especially as things go through different stages of approval. And in the very early stages, for privacy reasons, conflict reasons, until governments actually approve some of the trials, they don't, in a number of settings, want it to be talked about publicly while they're deciding on certain factors. At any rate, rumors got out about the fact that they were even considering a trial. And the rumor that hit Ghana actually was from somewhere in the US. A Ghanaian colleague of one of the journalists sent a message saying, you should go down to the maternal health ward in X village because we heard they're going to do a trial there and they haven't talked to you about it. And that sent off a whole spiral. We did a video. We went around and interviewed multiple different players. And you can see it at this YouTube link to show the complex environment you can go into and the different perspective from the online news editor to the local religious leader to basically the regulator, FDA type of local approval. All of them brought their different perspectives, and these are the kinds of perspectives we need to consider in the context of COVID. People do have their reasons for rumors. Sometimes they're not purposely trying to be sharing misinformation. It's sense-making in the absence of certainty, which we are in a very uncertain stage with COVID. The big project that we've been doing the last 5 years program has been community engagement identification, which is going to be very important with COVID because certainly in the Ebola, we also had 2 doses. So you need to make sure that when people come for their second dose, it's the same person, not a family member. So we had to work on the best way to secure that process, and then ways that we could use messaging or different types of approaches in mobile and very remote settings. This is our website. We're putting a lot of our focus now on COVID, drawing from our other social media listening, but also building out a resource page. And we we post latest news as it's coming up. But as I said, we are in the midst of overhauling this to have much more live data dashboards, so you can go into a country and see what we're thinking, hearing, or learning either through social media or surveys. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed to all 3 of our presenters. I'd like to ask you, even if you're sitting alone in front of your computer screen, to put your hands together for our presenters who are all doing work from the global level to challenge what's been called by WHO a global threat to public health. And we have some great questions, both from members of the Peer Hub, but also from across the platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, And I think I saw a question from Twitter. I'm not sure. We're going to get to all of them. And we also have Charlotte Mbu has invited several members of the Peer Hub to tell their story. So it looks like we may be running short on time. We see also lots of thanks from the from the members both on Zoom, and there's a little bit of a delay on the other platform. So I'm sure the applause will be coming in. Okay, here we go. Thank you, Parashiv Angela. All right, Raimi Marufu says, hope you can see me. I'm clapping my hands. Lumra Umar, who actually has asked a bunch of questions. Dr. Tanushri Mandal, who says, great session. All right, we're a little bit over halfway through. Let's get down now to looking at some of the questions and comments that we've received. I pulled out a few of the first ones. So we have Ebede Chinyere Blessing, who says it's important to know the countries where this survey was done and to take into consideration that trust in vaccination differs from country to country, and for multi-ethnic country like Nigeria from ethnicity to ethnicity. Maybe we'll ask Heidi Larson if she wants to comment on that, on what the diversity looks like and to what extent are there commonalities across the diversity. And then Alumra Umar actually has had at least 3 questions, very specific. Question to Susan, thanks for your presentation. What do you suggest are the successful medium to reach the elderly population? How to convince them that COVAX is safe? Any data from conflict countries? What are their main hesitancy reason? That's probably for Heidi. And then what were the age group of respondents? So obviously a concern about focused on the age groups. I'm going to turn back to our panel and ask if you who would like to take up these initial comments, Ebede Chinyere Blessing's comment, and address Alumra Umar's questions. Yes, Heidi?
Yes, you were speaking very fast. Can you, I got one that was about diversity. Can you?
Sure, so Ebede, let me see if I can share the screen again. Are you able to see? Let me see if I can spotlight.
I see the screen.
Yeah. All right. So just a concern about taking into consideration the differences within a country, such as in Nigeria, and then to, I guess, general concern about, how do we, to what extent can we make blanket statements across countries, or to what extent are there commonalities, and to what extent is it really like every place, every location, every area in the country, every country is different?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly a place like Nigeria, which has quite different situations between Kano State and Lagos, and different parts as with large countries like also India, Brazil. But even within smaller countries, there's definitely a diversity. On the other hand, you shouldn't let that paralyze you. There are some common themes, there are some common principles. I think you want to be listening to as much as you can. I think people, there are some themes. I think the biggest thing right now, or one of the biggest things, is people are anxious about safety. We're in, as I mentioned earlier, very uncertain times. So any way you can kind of try to give some sense of, if you can say so, normalness. I do think we need to talk more about the differences between the different vaccines. Some of the, as much as we can know. The challenge we have is that we don't have all the final information. But I think the more that governments can share who's going to get it first, because, and not just who, but who decided that, what's the process. People want to know about the decision making. We have very different publics than we used to have. But I do think there are some principles, but I do think the more you can go with local listening, the more effective you'll be.
Thank you, Heidi. All right, so we've got one specific question to Susan Mckay from GAVI, from Alumra Umar, who says, thanks for your presentation. What do you suggest are the successful medium to reach the elderly population, and how to convince them that COVAX is safe? Susan, would you like to address
yeah,
that?
I can't put my video on because, but just to answer that, I mean, obviously, as we've said, frontline health providers are going to be critical in this, in terms of building that confidence. People do have relationships with the health system and with providers. I think, of course, other trusted influencers, they're going to, religious leaders, traditional leaders. But of course, people also listen to their family. And I think this is where it's going to be so important that we have a joined up approach, because they will listen to their sons, their daughters who are, have a voracious appetite for social media as well. So I think that's why we're talking about the coordination of this, of making sure that the very best evidence is available, that people are speaking with one voice, that we can get the right facts and the right techniques to people. So I think it's going to be a joined up approach that's going to get the world back on its feet with building that confidence. Over.
Great. So Heidi, Lisa, and Susan, in the room with us are more than 250 participants, members of the COVID-19 Peer Hub, who are immunization professionals working at all levels of the system in their countries, in over 86 countries, who've been fighting to keep vaccination going, and who've learned to work together, defying distance during the pandemic, defying the pandemic to keep vaccination going, and who are now getting ready, thinking about, and some are involved in their country's preparation for the introduction and rollout of COVID vaccines. So I'd like to take a look at some of the questions from our room. There's Abdul Salam and Bella Dora, who've received quite a few votes. So I'd like to turn, let's start with let's see. All right, so yeah, and there's quite a few questions asking for what are the interventions that are supported by evidence? What are the ones that are known to be effective? So let's hear straight from Bella Dora first. Bella, would you be able to, we'd love to hear your question and then hear back from our panelists.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening.
Can you tell us, Bella,
Hello.
where are you calling from and what do you do when you're not on the call with us?
I'm from Indonesia. I was involved in measles rubella vaccine introduction in 2018. So at the time, the program was challenged by the vaccine hesitancy due to the massive spreading of hoax about the vaccine. So I would like to know if there any evidence-based intervention to tackle the hoax about the vaccine, and what I was experiencing during my involvement in measles rubella vaccine introduction. So there was a person who was spreading hoax through the social media, and the police at the time make it criminalize the person for spreading the hoax. So I would like to know, how do you think about criminalizing person who is spreading the hoax on social media about vaccine? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Bella. I'm betting that's actually, that's a hefty question to answer in a few minutes. I'd still, so let's put a pin in that one. All right. And obviously you're drawing on your professional experience, something that happened to you. So perhaps in developing your case study in the coming weeks, you'll be able to explore that more in depth. So before we turn back to the panel, we're going to hear a second question from Abdul Salam. And these are the questions that received the most votes. I'm going to ask you first, Abdul, to clarify. So you said as part of vaccine hesitancy, a part of vaccine hesitancy is lack of clarity and understanding, particularly COVID-19, like if immunoglobulin induced by COVID episode can vanish with the passage of time, how vaccine will do different to have a lasting immunity. So that's, again, quite a hefty question. Let's go back to the panel with these two issues. What do you hear when you hear such questions? Let's start with Lisa, then Susan, then Heidi. And of course, feel free to pass if you don't have anything specific to respond to, and respond to these two questions and what they evoke, really.
So firstly, thanks so much to everyone for all these fantastic questions. really thoughtful, diverse questions here. So thank you, everyone. So to the question from Bella, I would just say in brief, so what works? Well, we know that listening works and understanding works and being respectful and caring as well. And so sometimes people, if they do have concerns or if they even are spreading misinformation, they might not intentionally be aware that it's wrong or that, it's bad to have these questions. So I think it really starts with listening and saying, okay, this person genuinely wants to know more, and how can we just help resolve those concerns and bring them to a position where they would accept. So that's probably the best approach. And I would also say that forcing someone is also, it has potential to backfire. And yes, it might work in certain settings in a limited way at a specific point in time. But definitely in most places, the social norm is that people accept vaccines and they seek vaccines and they know their values. So really, I do think that in most cases, we want to value and build on that as well. So to the question from Abdul, and this question about immunity over time. So the vaccines that we're hearing a lot about at the moment, the data that's being generated is really quite early. So we do not know yet actually how these vaccines will perform over time. And we're going to need to follow the participants in these trials over the next few weeks and months and continue these studies to really learn more about the duration of protection of these new vaccines. So we will need to follow this closely to learn more. And as we have new knowledge that's being generated about these vaccines, governments and programs and experts do have a responsibility as well to keep people informed about what's happening and this new data and knowledge, so that people have access to correct information about what's actually happening. So filling these information gaps and really being sure that we're proactively getting accurate information out there, that's going to be really key in the next few months. So that's what I'd add to these really good questions. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you, Lisa Menning from the World Health Organization, Susan Mckay from GAVI, Heidi Larson from the Vaccine Confidence Project. Would you like to add or complement this initial feedback from Lisa on these two sets of issues formulated as questions by members of the Peer Hub?
I would just, I think Lisa said it beautifully, and I can't better that. But I do want to add that we can actually, obviously, also provide this group with some links for some really practical guides and tools that emphasize, how to do exactly what Lisa's just described. And I think everybody on this call who's motivated to be on this call can really not just do this yourself in terms of softer skills of listening and being non-judgmental and really putting across your strong belief that vaccination is a global good, but also helping people in your family amplify this message, because we need a social movement that can really dampen down the controversy and really just pass on the common sense and good advice. So we will follow up with those practical tools and links after this call.
Great, wonderful. And in fact, from the members of the Peer Hub and from our team is an invitation to you, to Heidi, to Lisa, to really come along with us. In the next 4 weeks, participants are going to be developing and peer reviewing each other's case studies, documenting what their experience has been in the past. And so your guidance and your contribution, the tools developed at the global level will be invaluable to the progress of participants in making sense of what they're confronted with and how to go about challenging vaccine hesitancy and then the entire spectrum that it is a part of in the future, especially during the pandemic. I'd like now to turn to Charlotte Mbu, who has prepared and invited participants, members of the Peer Hub, who have shared quite compelling stories about what they were confronted with, what they were able to do about it, and how they went about it. Charlotte?
Thank you very much, Reda, and I really want to thank Heidi, Lisa, and Suzanne for their presence here today. I'm going to turn directly to Kingston Kamkara, whom I've already invited to unmute himself. Kingston, if you can just go ahead and unmute your mic and share your vaccine hesitancy story with us, starting by introducing yourself, please.
Thank you, Charlotte, for giving me the opportunity. My name is Kingston Kamkara. I'm from the northeast state of India, bordering to Myanmar. I'm working with UNDP right now. I'm the state head implementing the electronic vaccine intelligence network, supported by GAVI through Ministry of India. I was sharing the story of, my personal experience. I was nominated as one of the national monitor for the Mission Indradanush. Mission Indradanush is a flagship program of under the leadership of Prime Minister of India. This program focuses on children who are left out, drop out, and who are missed out for the immunization. So every state in India, like who are performing, like purely who are performing poor in some districts are, taken as the target district. So I went to one village where there were 6 dropout children from that respective village. And it is a very difficult village. We go, to reach that village was a very challenging one. So I could manage to reach the village, and as soon as I reached the village, I check. If you go to the health facility, you can check the tracking bag, immunization tracking bag. It's blue in color. So if you check each month, you will find the the counterfoil of the mother's child protection card, like which child is due for which vaccine. So when I went there, I was just crossing the line listing, and I found out like 6 children of that village were due that day. So I asked them what happened, and I saw a few children near the clinic, near the sub-center. The children were, father was holding one baby, not coming for vaccination. So I was checking that, which one was due for which children, and it happened to be that family. So I asked the health worker what happened to that family. They said, hey, don't talk about them because last time they scolded us. We are not able to go and talk to them. So I said, what is the main reason? So I went personally. The family is in mid-20s. So I went and said they have 4 beautiful kids. So I went and told them, and the husband was very reluctant. He was feeding pigs in the big sty. And when I went, he said, I don't have time. But I went politely and said, sir, if you can just give me 5 minutes of your time. So he came back and he started scolding me, saying that last time my child took the immunization from this health facility and he developed a fever. So because of that, I cannot go for my plantation. So that's why I don't let my 3 kids take any more immunization. So that's where it was, eye-opener for me. I was carrying that booklet for vaccine, what vaccine we give and what disease it prevents. So I was explaining them, maybe one night you might have a fever by giving maybe BCG or TB.
Reda, we seem to have lost Kingston.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kingston, please proceed. We lost you for a few seconds. So if there's anything you can do to improve your connection, that would be great.
Yeah,
we're listening.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Can
yes,
you hear me now?
Clear now. Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. My network is not very good. Yeah. So I think the point that I want to focus is the importance of communication. I think our health workers, sometimes we are very busy. You will come with your specific timing. We know that in periphery sub-centers, they don't have A&M quarters are available. So they will come by local transport vehicle. So, sometimes the timing is not very suitable. So I sat with the family and they were very happy to learn about, oh, if you give this vaccine, it prevents from this diseases, when we show pictorial kind of thing was very helpful. So after communicating, after discussing for about 10-15 minutes, the husband was very happy. He came along with the baby and the due dose was given. So I was very, very happy, like with a lot of difficulties, I could manage to go there and convince these people. So the lesson learned was the 4 key message, usually given by the health worker. Sometimes we forget because we are very busy. So, like we ask them to stay back after 30, after the immunization, 30 minutes or at least 1 hour. But sometimes that is very difficult in the villages. They go for, daily wage kind of thing. So when they are immunizing the children, if they can explain, I'm giving BCG, this will prevent from this disease, showing a pictorial kind of thing. And I realized that being a patriarchal family, a patriarchal society, involving the father and knowing the importance of vaccination was very crucial lesson learned for me during that visit that I went. Thank you so much for the time. Like I will be writing more in my assignment. Thank you so much, Charlotte and team, for giving me the opportunity.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kingston and Charlotte. I'd like to turn to Dr. François Gass because starting tomorrow for participants, for members of the Peer Hub, he is going to be working perhaps with Kingston and also many others in the Peer Hub, together with Charlotte, organizing what we're calling lightning sessions. We know you're short on time. We know you're busy immunization professionals, especially even never more so than during the pandemic, perhaps. And François, would you like to tell us, before we turn back to the panel to comment on Kingston Kamkara's story, would you like to tell us what participants can expect starting tomorrow? And then any comments or further questions. What would you do with Kingston tomorrow in the lightning session?
Thank you, Reda, and hi to everyone present. I think it's a great session, and thank you for the panelists who have presented. I think it was very concrete, targeted information, very useful for all those online today. I hope it can be shared more widely for those who are not on panel but are part of this exercise. I think it's an excellent reference. I believe that I have been interested in the week when there was a share of experience. They're supposed to develop case study and to present their own experience. I think building a case study is a very useful exercise for everyone, especially when you have others listening that ask for clarification, to understand the real situation, to go into concrete details that explain that everybody understand really what happened, why it happened, who was concerned, and on what. And then the next step is how they address the situation in order to overcome that issue, and finalize by looking at what are the lessons learned and what would you recommend to your peers or to your colleague in the hierarchy to prevent similar problems occurring. I think we've never been at a time where there's so many vaccine hesitancy. I would hate to talk where I live, what I'm hearing in my island about vaccine hesitancy, but it's a special audience that want to have all the evidence and want to trust that evidence, listen to hundreds of social media. Luckily, it has not really invaded everywhere in the world, but unfortunately, we're at a time where listening, I think, has never been so important. And I agree that, I felt that the message was listening to people who have a vaccine hesitancy is a critical one. We never do it enough. And I would even share a recent experience here where someone had never immunized the kids in front of me and said, well, the problem I have, I've never been immunized myself by my mother and I'm healthy and I'm okay. Each time I want to raise the issue of vaccine, doctors have never take the time to explain to me about vaccine. And I think taking the time, as Kingston said, taking the time to talk to mother to understand the root cause, and I think it was raised by also Heidi, to really understand the cause before you jump on solutions, as proved in the various exchange we had so far, so useful in moving and succeeding in making convincing argument. I think these case studies that are going to be shared, discussed, being very specific, down to the details that are important, are going to be a very useful exercise and enrichment for all people who will all expect vaccine hesitancy, vaccine rejection. Sometimes there's more vaccine hesitancy than rejection, and moving to acceptance. So I think it's an extraordinary exercise that and such an immense sharing. The more you share, the more you learn. So thank you again to this opportunity to be part of this exercise. I'm learning as well at each session. Thank you.
Thank you, François. And so, sorry, that will start Wednesday, not Tuesday. Tuesdays for the Francophones. Apologies for that. But 2 occasions every week for members of the Peer Hub. You don't need to work on your case study alone. We will be supporting you every step of the way. And as you know, there's over 150 volunteers who have done this before and who've also volunteered to support you. So I realize we're over time. I thank the panelists who've been able to stay. So Lisa Menning and Susan Mckay have been able to stay with us. I'd like to ask both of them in closing to comment and share their thoughts on what they heard in Kingston Kamkara's story. More generally, what can be drawn from experience? Are there any limitations that participants should be wary of as they work on writing up their case studies?
Thanks so much, Rita, and to colleagues from Kingston and these experiences that have been shared. So I think you're on the right track, definitely. And these personal experiences are really what shapes our understanding of the communities that we work in. And ultimately, as health workers, our job is to serve those communities and support them and assist them. And it really starts by understanding their needs and perspectives and, offering them quality services. So, of course, that also does rely on health systems to then equip us to be able to do that job. But if we can help bring and make visible and bring to the fore those voices from our community, that's important too. So keep listening and keep doing your best. And thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. Susan Mckay from GAVI, would you like to comment on what you heard from Kingston, his story, and from today's session, perhaps?
No, I think that's really important, and I think learning and listening to what people really think about these issues. I must say, and I can't better what Lisa just said, but I do want to say that it's so important for us to seek the understanding of why people feel the way they do. I must admit, I have groups of friends in my circle who really are very anti-vaccine. And I must admit, rather than losing those friendships, I have to say that it's by listening to them and really understanding their point of view that I think I've got better at the work that I do. And it's important not to get into an argument. We've all been in those social situations where people have a very, very strong point of view. And I think it is by that active listening, not challenging, but also trying to think out what are the ways that you can share your knowledge and win people round to your point of view and diffuse that. So I do want to say that it's, the whole point about being polarized about an issue, it is about how can you find the common ground to not lose a friendship in the midst of this, and to take that learning an extra step in terms of coming up with really practical solutions to this problem, because we're not going to win this argument by getting into confrontational situations. So hopefully some people will come forward with case studies that aren't quite so positive, but from that learning, we'll also be able to come up with really good practical solutions of the way forward. Over.
Thank you so much, Susan Mckay, Lisa Menning, and Heidi Larson for your contribution today. And of course, to the hundreds of you who were connected to this session across the platforms. I have one last thing to ask of you if you've been participating in this session. And here it is. Whether you're watching on LinkedIn, on YouTube, we're live streaming this across all these platforms. Maybe you're even on Twitter and on Facebook. Before you go, I'd like you to either, depending if you thought this session was worth your time, add either a like, the thumbs up, a heart on some platforms. I think you can do that. And most important, liking is great. Sharing is what will actually help spread the word. In the same way that the people on the other side of the fence are using social media and digital media to spread their ideas, we need to use ours. So I'd like to really ask you to do that if you feel so, if that's all right. And I'd like to end this session with one last round of applause for those of you who are starting today, writing up case study based on your experience and how you challenged vaccine hesitancy and moved an individual or group towards acceptance. Thank you so much to our panelists and to all of you who joined us from all over the world. This was, as Tanushree Mandal said, a wonderful session. If you'd like to type in one last message, we'll be leaving a little bit of music just to keep sharing your many, many messages. All right, and thank you to Tanushree Mandal, Anisha, Molly Abruzzese. All right, and any last comments? There's a little bit of a lag, but we're going to wait a little bit just so you can share your final comments and thoughts. And of course, for members of the Peer Hub, we do this every Monday. Let us know on social media if you'd like to see more of this online and across these platforms. To answer Johan, yes, this information will actually, the recording is immediately available. You're watching us on Facebook, just check Facebook, check the Digital Scholar page, and you will see this right away. Ege Abe says, thanks to all panelists and colleagues. Gabdi Mousse, I think we just got the discussion started. It says, really, vaccine hesitancy is a major challenge for immunization services. Hassan just says, thank you. Thank you, Hassan, for attending. Abdeladif, thank you as well. Grace Vici, Lumi Grace. And remember, tell us where you're from, because we do have a global event. Mufakr Mian. All right, Sohini Sanyal, we're especially appreciative. We know in India and other parts of the world, it's late evening or even the middle of the night, and some of you have still joined. This is much, much appreciated. Thank you, AZ Bolo Peter, who says, thanks to the panelists and those who shared their experience and thought-provoking questions. I most cherish the message on listening, understanding, and engaging. Thank you, Peter. Aliou Maman Nauzo says, thank you. Majad Bagat is a statistician who wanted to know about the sample size for Heidi's research. Manoj, I'm sorry you didn't get a reply, but I hope you can. We will see you again in the Peer Hub. Gurinder Bir Singh says, great session. Joran, thank you as well. Musa Abdullah, he just sends a bunch of hearts, and I did ask for them, so here they are. You're welcome, Johan. Kabdi Mousse, thank you for joining and for supporting. Ebede Chinyere Blessing is one of our first commenters today. Maymoon Abdullah, you're welcome. Omar Farouk, team from Nigeria, had a very strong presence from the Nigerian Scholar team. Congrats. And we also saw many, many other countries represented. Nasra Love, Liv John, O'Neill Yefe, Nifjo. And we like doing this. This is really how we get to know you. We're defying distance to connect in this way. And we love every message. We read every message, every comment, every question. We're always surprised and appreciate your many, many messages. All right, and the messages, just keep going. We are going to have to stop at some point. I don't think we've ever had this kind of attendance. Fatima gives us a thumbs up. Abdiladif says, yes, indeed, believe we are a dream team through the Peer Hub. Immunization professionals who are willing to go above and beyond. Raimi Morufu, this is a highly informative session. And Balaganasa Kumar, thank you, Balaganasa Kumar. All right, let's call it a day and look forward to seeing you, for those of you who are in the Peer Hub, on Wednesday for the first session with François Gass, working specifically helping you develop your case study.